Is anybody talking? I'm not hearing anything.
No, we're just waiting for Bob to join.
Okay, now I hear something that reassures me.
Hello, David.
Hi, nice to see you.
Gre- Greetings from Brian, who is in Asia right now. So I'm a poor substitute for him from Bourne.
Okay, whereabouts is he? In Thailand?
Uh, in Thailand.
Yeah, well, he has reason to be there.
Yes, absolutely. He actually should be back in Florida, but he sent his parents down there who have property there, and Brian's got property there. So they're dealing
Okay.
with the hurricane.
Oh my, yes. Okay. Well, he's done a lot of good work on this thing.
Absolutely.
And we're going to hear what the news is from Mr. Markey's office, I guess.
I hope so. Hey, David.
Hi.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
Hey, Bob. Bob, how's it going? Good. The next time Brian, I don't know if you already heard the story from when he went to Vietnam and we had to help him out because there was some issue with his passport, that I forget exactly what they were doing, but we had to get involved from the Senate level to help him out. It was one of the first conversations we had. So
quite successful, as I recall.
I think he has a wife in Thailand, a Thai woman, I believe.
Yeah, it's I don't know exactly where they are in their relationship status, but it's a girlfriend, and she's in law school in Bangkok right now.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, I used to wander around that part of the world spent a lot of time there.
Yeah, me too. I did a couple of World Bank missions on a couple of projects there.
Oh, okay. All right. Doing what kind of thing?
Environmental, primarily.
Okay.
I was basically there was a small for the World Bank $20 million loan for environmental and social mitigation for a hydroelectric dam that had been started by the military government. And when the military government was replaced by a democratically elected government, all of a sudden everybody who had been displaced by the flooding reservoir and had lost fisheries, etc., started complaining to the government. So they gave them a small loan. And as the project officer said, he said, this is the most hassle per dollar lent of any grant or loan that the World Bank had made in Asia, apparently.
Oh, well, that sounds like a mess. We'll talk about that another time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Bob.
How's it going? I'm apologize for being a couple minutes late here. So we have a limited number of people on the call right now. But we will, I guess, get started with some quick introductions of who's here. I'll just run down, introduce myself, Bob Espandola, from the town of Fairhaven, and I'll just run through as I see on the screen. Rick Pierce, go ahead.
Rick Pierce, I'm the selectman's representative from Somerset to Serpent, Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development Commission.
All
Or
right.
district, I guess.
Okay, and David Cole, thank you. And David Cole.
David Cole, member of the Internet Advisory Committee in Westport.
Well, thank you. And Robert Dwyer.
Hi, Bob Dwyer, chair of the Cable, Internet, and Telecom Advisory Committee to the Bourne Select Board.
Right, and I have Bill here.
Hey, Bob. Hey, everyone. Bill Seitz with Digital Ubiquity Capital.
Okay, all right, thank you. And Brian Preacher.
Yes, I'm Brian Preacher with Gray Bar. I live on the North Shore. I know I don't sound like it, but I do. And I work for Gray Bar. We're a distributor and work with several of the munis throughout Massachusetts. And so I just like to listen and learn as much as I can.
Okay, thank you. John Zanos.
Hey, Bob. John Zanos, a partner with Digital Ubiquity Capital. Listening in, we're doing and evaluating a number of projects in the Massachusetts area and in the Southeast. And we're a broadband developer of public-private partnerships working in conjunction with municipalities and counties. So thanks. Well, I'm going to listen in and not slow you guys down.
Okay, thank you. And Mark Lanigan,
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, Mark Lanigan, Regional Assistant with Senator Ed Markey's office. I'm our in-state lead on telecommunications and emerging technology.
all right, thank you. And we'll get right back to you in a minute here. Mark, I just noticed, see Brian Espinola just sign on. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Brian.
Hi, yeah, Brian Espinola, City of New Bedford, Senior IT Analyst.
And Jonathan Nunes.
Hi, everyone. It's Jonathan Nunes. I'm the Assistant IT Director for the City of New Bedford.
Okay, and I think that's everyone so far. If other people jump on the call, I'll try to pay attention to that and let them get introduced. But I know one of the key areas of focus that some people wanted to address here was the BEAD challenge process and some frustration that a lot of communities faced in that process. And I know there have been some lengthy discussions with certain people. I know Brian McCarter from Bourne has had significant conversations with Mark Lanigan at Senator Keating's office. David Cole has expressed a lot of interest in trying to further this discussion and see if there's anything that we can do collectively as the coalition members to try and see if we can have some input on future programming. And I missed a call that took place I think last week or the week before with Mark and I think Brian and David, but it might be nice to just start with kind of a summary of what transpired there and if any suggestions that might have come out of that meeting. I don't know if that's something, Mark, you'd be able to share with us, or David, either one of you want to take the lead on that?
I'll pass to Mark.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bob. This is something that we've been back now. I think actually when I first started this job a little over a year ago, I think one of my first meetings was with Brian McCarter, and he flagged this as a concern, back a year ago. And so we've been working on this with him and with Bob Dwyer and David and you and all sorts of folks. We share similar frustrations that this process has not been conducted in ways that are most conducive to getting this money to the community level where it's really needed. And so Senator Markey, our office, has been having conversations with folks at the state level. We've been having folks with MBI, conversations with MBI, Executive Office of Economic Development for the state. Have also had conversations with NTIA and are trying to get a sense of kind of where there can be tinkering with this process as it currently stands. And those conversations are still ongoing. We're still regularly meeting with them and talking this over. But one of the things that we talked about and addressed kind of in detail last time we met was how we both walk and chew gun at the same time and address current problems with the BEAD rollout while also planning for future programming, like you said, Bob. And so we're looking at different strategies for future broadband legislation, how to learn from the BEAD rollout, which has had its issues, has had its criticisms across the country, and what a more impactful and more meaningful broadband package would look like in the future. And we're hopeful, depending on how things go in the next couple months, with Congress and everybody, we're hopeful for another broadband package to come out at some point very soon, because it's definitely being seen as more of a priority at the federal level now, which is great. We just need to make sure that product, whatever gets put out, learns from the mistakes that were made during the BEAD process. So what I'm really excited to do, Bob, is listen in terms of the frustrations that people have had, and Brian and David and Bob Dwyer, and we've had a lot of conversations about this, and so have all of that taken into account. Got it all written down. I've got a long document running that I think you all started and sent to me, and I've just been continuing to add, these frustrations to the to the list. It's an unfortunate document because it's all things that people are unhappy with. But it's lessons too at the same time. So
Yeah, and so just to step back, and I apologize for misintroducing you. And I didn't introduce you as from Senator Markey's office. I think I actually said in the email something about Senator Keating's office. So my apologies for that.
we work
and-
closely with Bill Keating. He's great. So
Okay. So before we do that, though, I'm wondering if you might just elaborate a little bit on when you talk about we, as in your office, working on meaningful ways to impact broadband legislation and programming. Are there resources beyond yourself that are working on that? Are you kind of the lead, and then there are other people behind the scenes? Is it? I'm just curious. It seems like it's a significant undertaking.
yeah, so I'm our in-state lead on telecommunications. So whatever concerns are coming out of the state, I'm taking those back and I'm bringing them to our DC office, and we have a number of DC staffers who are working on this. And I think the sort of model for how our office works really well in this way, that we have folks here in the state that are working on the front lines of this. My job is to take all of this back and bring it to DC. And our DC office has been really great in navigating, because I'm not I don't have a technical background, and I don't have a legal background. They're navigating that side of things and trying to understand how this actually becomes legislation down the road, when we're at that stage. So I can tell them, that, we're having these issues with the community having to be the source of the challenges in the first place, while ISPs have a lot of this information just at their hands already. I don't know how that gets put into legislation. But our DC office does, so they're working on this too, and we have a number of staffers at DC who have it top of mind.
Mark, let me elaborate. Bob, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Bob. No, but go
Yeah,
ahead.
just a quick question. Is this being, in addition to, again, Senator Markey's staff, is this going to committee staff? I'm really not familiar with what committee where a bill like this would originate, but obviously he's, I think, I can't remember the name of the subcommittee he's chair of, but is it going to the committee staff and to the other senators who are involved on that committee? Or are they talking?
And that's I think once we get sort of down the road on what our specific ideas look like, then it goes to the committee staff. And so luckily Senator Markey serves on the Commerce Committee, Commerce, Science, and Technology, which is where this would originate from. So he's got a good role in terms of already having the ear of other senators. And back when he was in the House, he was chair of the broadband subcommittee for some odd number of years. And so he's got a lot of these connections that we're ready to jump on as soon as we've got like a very concrete idea of what it should look like a future piece of legislation that really I would really like to benefit what people were talking about before, the public-private partnerships, open access, municipal networks, regional municipal networks. That's where we're really trying to target here.
Mm-hmm.
Is there going to be?
Could I raise just a couple of questions? One is, I'm wondering whether the feeling we have here, or at least from Brian and myself and others, is that this BEAD challenge was just a fiasco, that it was supposedly meant to benefit local communities, but it was made so difficult that it was impossible. And my understanding is that as a result of all of the local stuff being rejected, that the money will end up going primarily to the private internet service providers rather than to the local municipal activities that we represent. And so is there a kind of recognition of the fiasco that this was, or is this something that we just yell about and others don't share?
No, I think we share that worry, and we've asked the state's economic development office, and we've asked MBI from our office. Senator Markey's office has asked them to prioritize open access networks in their determinations down the road. That's one of the ongoing conversations that we're trying to have, is because they have already laid out the points that they're going to award once awards come out. So we're trying to figure out what the best route is for our advocacy in terms of, because we do want this to prioritize open access. We don't want this to go to the people that already have the money to do this, but just aren't choosing to. We want it to go to the folks that could really use the money on the ground. So
is there a hope of being able to stop the distribution if it's going to be headed only towards the internet service providers?
And that is something that also got brought up in the last meeting, and it's probably unlikely. It's very infrequently does any government agency ever claw back funding. And even when I asked, people didn't really know what that process would look like. It's that rare.
Well, is there any exploration of other states? Have they experienced similar problems to what we've gone through?
Well, I think the odd thing about the BEAD program is, in terms of all of the different states trying to roll this out at the same time, Massachusetts seems to actually be a little bit ahead of some other states where they are right now in the process. Some of them don't even have the initial agreements written that had to actually launch the BEAD process in the first place. So,
well,
there's not a ton of evidence from other states.
My question that follows on from this, is it worth our time to try to worry about this BEAD challenge, or should we just forget about that and try to move on to other things that may offer some better chance or hope of benefiting the communities rather than the internet service providers? And I think you may be in the best position, knowing what's coming down the road, what the opportunities are going forward. Should we be looking to how to try to construct those, design those so that they have some chance of fairness in them and not being so distorted and turn into such a huge waste of time? I mean, we wasted days trying to make this thing work and got rejected on everything. So that's a real pain in the ass from my point of view to have had done that. And I don't want to do it again and end up empty-handed. So we need to be looking for things that are going to provide us some benefits and not just a lot of wasted effort.
Yep. Mark, let me elaborate just a little bit. It'd be, from our point of view, it'd be really good if there some money could be found in commerce or something to do, a medium-sized contract to a consulting company to do a mid-BEAD process lessons learned, just identify where the glitches are and kind of use that to inform the remaining states that are moving down the path slowly, but number two, inform the committee, whatever committee is going to do this, to inform the structure of the legislation for follow on here. It would seem, Gigi Son's group or somebody like that, somebody who doesn't have any, any financial stake in this at all, to go and they know the players, somebody who knows the players, who could talk to the people in the individual states and identify where the glitches are, and how, ideally, how the states who are following along can do this better so they don't end up in the quagmires that David just described and we've been in.
That's an excellent idea, I think, Bob. And I'm wondering, is there, as David mentioned before, that this was intended to get the funds into the hands of the local communities, but was that really ever a stated mission of the BEAD program? I mean, could they point back and say, well, we never promised you that?
Yeah, so NTIA actually, when they rolled it out originally, the goal of the program was to serve all unserved and underserved locations. And Senator Murphy wrote them a letter in 2022 in which he asked them to prioritize open access networks. And in response to that letter, they put into their model guidance prioritizing open access networks as part of the mission that they wanted to see undertaken with the funds. So that was in there. It was model guidance that was delivered to, it was an ask of everybody that's been delivered down to the states. And so trying to figure out which, how states are awarding points for open access is kind of another ongoing conversation that we're having, because there are some states who don't even allow municipal networks even to begin with. Like, they're just completely outlawed. So we're trying to figure that out as well. Is how they're being implemented across different states. And David, I do like that idea, and Bob, about studying the current things that are going on to inform, the future.
Yeah, one point,
the future programs.
Brian has said that the information which we were trying to develop through the challenge is already available in a much more efficient way. And he spelled that out, how that could be obtained. And I think that needs to be looked at seriously. I mean, supposedly the BEAD challenge was to identify unserved and underserved areas. And we went through all these crazy gyrations to try to do that. But according to Brian, who's off in Thailand and can't speak for himself, that can be done much more easily and efficiently, lower cost and everything, with resources that are already available to us. And I think that needs to be addressed before the money gets distributed to the ISP people, to make sure that we have tried to use this system for identifying underserved areas, because we are an underserved area in Westport, and we just haven't been able to demonstrate it to the satisfaction of the MVI folks. So some way should be found to do that.
And the other thing
Yeah.
I wonder too is, Mark, when you talked about down the road and just to try to understand the timeline that we're talking about, where I don't think you ever got to the answer that David was looking for about, is it worth our time and effort, anybody's time and effort, to try to continue down the road of commenting, complaining, whatever, on the current BEAD process. But so if you could kind of just maybe, if you have some guidance on that. But secondly, when you talk about down the road and these new programs that are on the horizon, what's the kind of rough timeline on that? And do you anticipate that the election in November could have an influence on changing course for those programs?
And I do think, when I say programs on the horizon, it could be any number of things. There could be, there are lots of things that we want to do, but election in November, future circumstance, any number of things could, get in the way of that. And because there's not any concrete proposal right now that is passed both chambers of Congress and has the president's signature, other than what we currently have, like, I don't, setting expectations here, like, there's not like a particular time that I have that, like, this is definitely going to be introduced and we're going to see this coming out or anything like that. And I think particularly after November 5th, we're going to have a better idea of where the sort of priorities are, whatever the administration is after November, and whatever both houses of Congress are going to agree to. And so it'll look very different depending what happens in November. And so that being said, because I don't know what it's going to look like on the federal level, and I don't know when we'll get money again for broadband programs, my personal suggestion, and this is just me personally speaking without a crystal ball or anything, without, is to work on both at the same time. Like, there is money in front of us right now, and we're still fighting, and the senator's still fighting to make that money work for Massachusetts. So I would continue fighting for that while also fighting for a better program down the road, because I don't know when a better program down the road will happen. But we do have this money in front of us now, which we're still trying to make sure it works as well as it can with the difficulties that, we've heard, which I do think one of the number one difficulties is just that the B challenge process was an incredibly technical process that one had to go through. And it didn't, we can maybe do this in a way that's not as technical for people. I think that's one of the lessons learned.
Okay. And what about earlier you mentioned that they've already laid out the points for awards, and are you referring to the way the money's been allocated so far, or is that what you meant by the points for awards?
Yeah, this is the scoring rubric that MBI put out.
Okay.
Once the whole challenge process is over, once the adjudication phase has ended, once they've made determinations about what the maps will look like, then the actual grant programs open that communities and ISPs will apply to get funding. And then those applications go in and they get, there's a rubric, they get scored, and then MBI will make the determinations after that. That's the rubric is what I was referring to.
Mark, are you familiar with New York's municipal infrastructure program?
I'm not.
That's something you should look at. It's based on an open access network, and it's emphasizes P3 and the participation of the municipalities, and the way their rubric is pretty well laid out, that it's skews to the communities.
Great. Okay. I'll definitely take a look at that.
Okay, good.
So Bill, maybe, while you're with us, I know your firm, does development work and whether it's through a PPA or some other arrangement. What would the open access model, how does that work with an investor like yourself?
Well, and I promise, John and I sort of promised each other we'd be quiet on this, so I'm gonna sort of defer to him if he wants to jump in. Otherwise, I will continue. John, do you want to talk about it? He might have.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm still here. I'll give a quick overview. We, as Bill said, had hoped and wanted to be in a listening mode. And
maybe I could, in fairness, maybe it's a question that you could answer in general terms, not specific to your firm. You know what I mean? Just in general with private equity funds.
That's a good way to think of it, Bob. I'm happy to do that. So, our view is there's three choices in this broad model, as Mark, you outlined, and there are some preferences, and the senator definitely advocated for that, which we recognize. And that was the idea of either the municipalities can try to do this all by themselves, defer to working with just the incumbents, which means we trust you, you do it, or the big gray area in between, which is some combination of partnership between private capital and private entities and the municipality. And what we believe is, in general, there's a benefit to all municipalities to make sure that you only build this once, dig it once, disrupt your neighborhoods and main streets once, and then share that infrastructure as amongst as many service providers as possible. No different than what we do with roads, no different than what we do with rail tracks, no different than what we do with every utility in the US other than internet connectivity. And then our interest, as a group, I'll call it the money side of the equation, and the developers, is to figure out how much public money needs to be contributed to a project and how much private money can be justified in the project. And that's the back and forth between, let's say, a municipality and a firm like ours to figure out what that right balance is. And of course, part and parcel of that is going through the BEAD process to determine what amount of public funds are available. But as Mark mentioned, that doesn't need to be BEAD only money. right? Like our view is you look at the project and you look at what are the public funds that need to be contributed. And there are multiple sources beyond just BEAD. Now, certainly BEAD has become the discussion of the day because it's such a big pot of money. And this process has been, as I think, David, you said, so consuming that, you know, it requires people to hunker down and make a decision if you're going to fight for your allocation or not. But our hope is we'll be looking at these projects first holistically and figure out the public and private funds necessary to make them happen, and preferably in an open access model that allows for one infrastructure to be shared amongst other people, no different than, you know, how we operate the road system. So hopefully that helps, Bob. Happy to.
It did from my perspective. You know, it's anyone else have any questions or comments on that? Feel free to jump in. But yeah, in general, on
Let me
this,
just add one quick thing. And the municipal infrastructure project was based on program was based on 4 pilots that New York State did for open access networks, proof of performance, which they did prove. And the key to what John is saying is, and I think David or someone else mentioned it, is the money going to the ISPs, or is it at least some of it going to municipalities so they have a say in the whole construction, operation, maintenance, and future of the network? And that's what the municipal infrastructure program in New York does. It empowers the municipalities, be it a county or a region or whatever, because they get some of the money.
okay. Well, and I'm wondering, so the answer Mark gave us is that there is still, it's still worthwhile for us to try to, you know, advocate or, you know, write letters like, you know, the people from Bourne have been doing, et cetera, for the current BEAD program, right? That's just maybe, you know, from a timing. Was there a particular area though that you would say from everything? I know that Brian and Bob and others down there have been at this for a long time. They've been very diligent in their efforts, you know, covering a lot of ground. Is there a more pointed focus now that we're at the stage we're right now? We are at right now that communities can, you know, hone in on a particular idea that we should be focused on, and you know, maybe 1 or 2 key things to advocate for. Is that a fair question?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm probably not the best equipped to speak to this because MBI will be making the determinations ultimately. But you know, as the adjudication phase is currently ongoing, you know, if the attention is still on the actual challenge process, then I think the adjudication phase as they move through, I don't know if they still like are taking cases in terms of, you know, I think that this should have been accepted. I think this should be declined. I don't know if they're taking that or not. And then past the adjudication phase, which is maybe in my mind, might be more of a place where there can be more sway. Maybe writing what you think your community needs, what it could really benefit from. So when they're going through and making these determinations, they know the sort of things they should be looking for in Fairhaven, in Falmouth, in Westport, in Somerset, you know, wherever, in New Bedford.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not the best equipped to speak to that because it's MBI who's you know going through and doing all of this, but.
Okay, Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, just one example of that is, as we probably expressed before, now in the adjudication phase, we've gotten some indications that at least one of the ISPs has filed massive numbers of rebuttals. And Brian went through with some help of a little bit of outside help and he's put together a letter that we were going to consider having our select board send, but I basically put it on hold because the letter is 14 pages long.
Wow.
And he went through and he found all of the explicit details, both in MBI's own rules, in the NTIA rules, and the FCC rules, of exactly how these have been done. And I mean, to the point where he was going into individual cases, conflict cases that the FCC had to decide on, where they said, okay, you need to do it this way. It's not in their regulations. But I can't put that before our select board because their eyes would roll back. So we're now redrafting it to put a one-page high-level view for anybody to see of what the problems are, and they deal with what we view as unsupportable rebuttals for the community anchor institutions, and we submitted 35 in board, and also apparent violations of their rules. And we don't know for sure because it's a non-transparent process inside MBI and during the adjudication of how the individual speed tests that did get accepted as initial challenges, got beyond the stage that David and company in Westport were able to get to with excruciating effort. And we got what appeared to be one of these census block group challenges that should be accepted. And we know that that's been a rebuttal has been challenged, but we can't see any of the data. So the objective of this letter is to say, gee, follow your own rules, okay? And by the way, here's an appendix, and we're going to footnote it or endnote it or something like that for every sentence that to put in the front letter that says, here's the rule you have to follow, and we expect you to follow your own rules. And just and if we get to the end after, what's the end date for this process? October 26th. Then we found out that there's evidence that they haven't followed their rules. There's going to be hell to pay. I don't know what it's going to be, but there's going to be some mighty unhappy people in Bourne, and we'll have that documentation or how to document it available for everybody on this call to see if the other municipalities got the same treatment.
Yeah, one of the points you made there, Bob, I think, it appears on the surface to be a very simple, non-technical issue, openness and transparency. And, in any form of government isn't the objective when you're dealing with taxpayer dollars that everything is supposed to be open and transparent. And these are at any, whether they come from the federal government and dispersed through, the state government, that they're taxpayer dollars that are being distributed at very high levels and high numbers. And, that seems maybe like something that could be a key focal point, because a lot of frustration I've heard from the group down there that's been working on this so hard is just in that area. Like, if they could clearly see, why things are being rejected and, the data that supports it and everything. So
I think it's really unrealistic to expect that anything is going to be done to interrupt this process during the last 3 months of this year. We're going to be fighting to preserve the integrity of the election process and make sure we don't get a repeat of January 6th and what happened 4 years ago. That's going to be the focus at the national level and at the most of the local levels. And so we aren't going to be able to change anything. The only thing I think, the only hope is to stop the distribution, because it would be based upon an unfair process, and go back and do it all over again using available information to identify unserved and underserved areas, and then try to allocate money to organizations that are prepared to work in those unserved areas to bring service to the people. And that isn't the ISPs. And I think if it moves ahead on the tracks it's on now, it's all going to go to the ISPs and the money will be gone. So I think that's the choice we face.
Do you think, Mark, that there's a realistic chance of them funding being held by, and I think they, you know, the basis for that would have to come from a much larger consensus group than this, you know, the few people we
This
have on
little
this
group.
call. Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah, and it's very, very rare that that ever happens. So I would say it's highly unlikely.
but could,
Yeah, it's just
well,
very rare.
what about the comment about openness and transparency and kind
Yeah.
of forcing that? Isn't that something that should be, you know, something that we could challenge?
That is a good point. Yeah, and that is how we've started every single meeting that we've had with MBI since we've been talking to them about this. Is first point is always got to be more open and transparent because they're not answering questions. They're not putting questions on. You know, we have a lot of problems with, you know, how open they've been about all of this. So we've been hammering on that. Yeah. So I would say if that is, you know, continued advocacy that you want to do as well, I don't think that's a bad thing because I do think openness and transparency is who can disagree, you know, openness and transparency. It's a good thing. So
Yeah, I mean, it's just that there seems to be clear examples, and I see Brian joined us. Are you from Thailand, Brian?
Yeah, calling in from Asia right now, so
Wow.
it's a little early.
Yeah,
Good morning.
You're clearly the
rough
furthest
morning.
away, and I think this makes two times. I think one time you joined us from Poland, I think so, right? Am I mistaken? So you're, yeah, pretty
It
cool.
underlies how important this is to me and how
Yeah.
badly it's going with MBI to log in from 3
Yeah.
in the morning to hear what you guys are saying.
Wow. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so you know, I don't know if you know, caught it, how did you just come online? You kind of catching us right now?
Yeah, it just came
Okay.
online.
I just realized that you were there, but yeah, we're just trying to think of ways to make any kind of an impact in the existing process. And it seems like there's a lot of it's unlikely that we're going to be able to have a significant impact on holding the funds from being distributed the way they are or anything like that. But maybe there's that case to be made for, you know, the open and transparent, seeing the data, you know, that's being used to justify these rebuttals and everything. So I know.
Well, we did some digging. They're already in default of their own rules. So
Yeah.
never mind the federal rules. Bob, do you want to?
Well,
Yeah, he
already
that hornet's nest?
Yeah, he already gave us that rundown. Yeah.
described our our revolving letter that hopefully by the 15th will go out from our select board, probably to everybody on this call, as well as straight to MBI, to Mark, et cetera, and everybody else on this call.
And is that going to be?
I wish it didn't have to be a letter. Like, this should be a conversation with them.
Yeah.
Right.
Is that letter going to MBI directly? That's who the recipient is?
That's the idea. It's addressed to them and said, by the way, we've gone through and we've identified every jot and tittle of all of the your own rules, the NTIA rules, and the FCC case law rules, if they will. And during your adjudication process, we expect you to adhere to these rules, and we're going to be watching. Again, we would much rather have seen this to be done in an open process, but since it isn't, we're just reminding you that we know these rules, and here's a 14-page compendium of the rules we've been able to find.
Thank you. And Mark, you know, I don't want to misquote you what you were saying before, but I know it sounded as though you were saying our opportunity might be best after the adjudication phase, right? Like there might be more of a potential for impact there, if, you know, whatever that might look like. What is the timeline?
I think in both. I think adjudication phase and then post adjudication.
Okay.
I think both of them have a potential. I just know the post adjudication phase better because we've been looking very closely at the rubric now. But I think both of them.
And what is the timeline again for that to be completed? Adjudication?
Adjudication, is
October,
that
October 26th, right?
That is the date you mentioned before. Okay.
Yeah, can we
Is that
just,
right, Brian? Sorry.
18.
18th?
October 18th.
Yeah.
Bob?
So
the whole thing is supposed to take 180 days, I think, right? That's the
Bob,
the
between
locations
challenge
will
and-
be crystallized on the 18th. So it's a matter who gets the money, I guess, not, and or does the money get diverted? So before the 18th, you can change what towns it's going to.
Okay, David, you were going to say something?
could we get Brian to comment on the alternative way in which information could be gathered on unserved and underserved areas that he's written about, just to mention, just get that out on the table for this group, that it seems like it's an easy way as an alternative to this whole challenge thing that we've all been struggling with. Brian, can you enlighten us on that?
MBI already has it. They purchased the Ocala, also known as speedtest.com database, and they have the speed test results from the whole state, everyone just randomly running on devices, and they have the data down to the at least the zip code, I think, and even tighter than that. So, they can already flag down to some pretty low levels of areas in a data set they've already paid for. That's one way. And
is that part of the openness and transparency? If that data's already been collected or is available to them, and isn't that part of what could be requested, that they provide that information to every municipality? Or
so the data set's licensed, so there has been some releases of it. Cape Cod Commission has been able to get a copy for the Cape. The whole, like you can't release the whole data set, but I think extractions therefrom of it, like telling you what areas are bad, I think they've been able to release.
But they've also, Brian, it's also possible for the ISPs themselves to run tests out of their offices. The same thing, that I guess the tests that they would presumably be using in their rebuttals, and they can tell where they have problems. They might want to hang on to that as confidential business information, but
it's one of the FCC rulings. So on a previous program, they ruled that the ISPs are supposed to do this at the top of the hour, so that you can't cherry pick the data, and they can only delay it if a test fails to go through to their servers, and then they can delay it 1 minute, repeated until the test runs through, so for technical difficulties. And so this was an FCC ruling already on how you run a speed test. So we wouldn't be treading new ground. There's already existing FCC rulings on how this is supposed to be done.
So the data set is licensed, but couldn't there be a request for summary data that would be at least
yeah
sufficient?
Summary data, like we probably couldn't get them to release every single speed test that they've received in the Ocala one, but yeah, like summary data is possible, because I've seen summary data actually from this data set.
So for example, if the most
what about
critical
getting
Go ahead, David.
the median speeds from the census blocks? Could they do that?
I think the Microsoft data goes that granular. Anytime I get to these type of data sets, I usually get on a call with David Still, because he's the expert on this kind of stuff. But it's either between the Ocala one or the Microsoft speed test data. You can get down to about the census block or even the tract. I think I got You gotta double check where, but you basically can get down to the neighborhood and say, okay, this is where our problems are in the state. It's this neighborhood, not the whole town. And you can direct the attention, that's why we knew, don't even bother looking at Buzzards Bay and of Bar Town because it's fine. And all the problems are in Katamet and Pocasset and Sagamore Beach. And so focus our attentions there. And we knew that between the Microsoft speed test data and the Ocala data that is available, it's already been published in summary form.
Oh,
Just,
I just-
David, let me just interrupt. The real issue here is, based on MBI's past performance, what Brian describes as a perfect world, but based on MBI's past performance, either because of just slowness, inertia, lack of staffing, or whatever, at least during this grant making process that we're in right now, we're never going to get any of that. I think, Mark, that's something to ask for if the whole thing comes crashing down, in terms of trying to reverse engineer how they made their decisions. And I think we are going to have some difficulties there, understanding how they decided to prioritize these, despite their rubric for how they score these. But we may need this after the fact, but it's not going to help us right now. That's my beyond fear.
Yeah, what I'm suggesting to Mark is that we ought to try to help bring the whole thing crashing down because it's been such a disaster. And if
Right.
it just goes ahead, why, it's going to send all the money to the wrong people. And so rather than sitting back and letting it happen, I think we should be trying to crash it.
So one thing that I wanted to bring Brian up to speed on, a conversation we had a little while ago. But before that, well, you mentioned that the summary data is already available at the census tract level. Is there a link that you can share with in the chat to where that data, that's public information, or is that?
The Microsoft published their data set. I think there is maps made off of it, and you can go look at. And the Okla one is, I'll have to check my emails how wide I was given.
I wonder if
So
it's not
I'll do some digging for the Okla one, but the state only purchased the aggregate for the year data set. There's one level further you can go and you can purchase the month by month. So it's a slightly bigger license. I didn't purchase that one. That one would have been really interesting in any of these coastal towns where the swings in population are pretty wild. And so that would be the really juicy data set to get. The state didn't pay for that one.
Okay, but you had to pay for some subscription to get the data that you're referring to. It's not
The state paid for it. The state has
State
already
did.
paid for it and is in possession of this data.
Right, so it's just a matter of knowing how to ask for it for a community, right? Okay, but going back to the, Bob mentioned earlier that he thought that would be really helpful. Something that Senator Markey's office could help advocate for is a study to be done on lessons learned on the existing bee challenge process right now, and perhaps one of the things that this group could be really helpful with on that is if the funds are available, and Mark, thought that maybe there's a good possibility that might be something that could happen. Maybe this group could help develop the scope of what that study would be. Like, here are really the key areas that we think that the study should cover. You know what I mean? That type of thing. Do you think that's
Yeah, there's a disaster. It's an unmitigated disaster, and learning from it is really all that there's left to do, because it's been an absolute failure of a process.
Okay, what I'm suggesting though is that let's just say the funds become available, a consultant comes on board, and it has a task to do to try to look at the bee challenge process and lessons learned from it, and they need to start somewhere with, okay, what is our scope of work? What are we going to focus on? What parts of the challenge process failed? Why, and why, whatever. Maybe, a bullet list of things that that should absolutely be part of that report. could come from this group. You say,
Mhm.
the data, not lack of transparency, whatever they are. And you guys have lived through it in painful fashion. So, but I'm just suggesting that maybe we stay in touch with Mark, and if that study becomes closer to reality, that we could really kind of have a sit down and suggest, what that scope of work would look like.
Yeah, I
And
don't think
just to
anyone's looked at that before from the local level.
Brian,
And-
real quick, you missed it before, but one other aspect of this is that apparently, according to Mark, Massachusetts is ahead of a number of other states who are only beginning this process. It's clearly something at the federal level that helps save a number of other states from going through the same agony. Would be something that's immediately useful. I think that's what we said before, as well as there also is a potential for follow-on legislation and follow-on funding beyond BEAD to try to do this better, right, supplement, whatever you want to call it. The scope for regulations that come from that legislation, should be informed by what went wrong here.
And Mark has already written up in considerable detail what has gone wrong here. And I thought they ought to start with that and build on that to move ahead and try to do this kind of analysis to save the rest of the country from having to go through it.
That's true. All the work he's put into this, all the people down there in Bourne have put into this, could be used as a great starting point, okay, well, I think this has been very helpful. I don't know if anyone has anything else for Mark before, and you're certainly welcome to stay on, Mark, for the rest of the meeting here, but I just
I
wanted
unfortunately have to go at 5 for an event with the senator, but appreciate hearing everything. Definitely, I hope everyone here has my email. Continue to reach out anytime. If not, Bob, if you want to send it around.
You have the stuff that Mark has already written. I mean, that Brian has already written, Mark. Do you have his documents?
I have, Brian, you sent me a document that was maybe like a 7-page, maybe it was like 7-ish pages detailing all and that's where I started from when I was going through and making our kind of omnibus document of all these problems. So
yeah, we did
if
a
there's
lot of
more
the
updates,
federal
then-
level issues. If we're going to start diving into future legislation, we probably would add additional things that are more state specific, I guess.
Mark, Brian and I can send you an early draft as long as you just use it for background reference of the letter we're going to be drafting for the Bourne Select Board. I've got to be careful not to that it doesn't get violate the Massachusetts open meeting law, but you can use that for background in terms of the depth of the complexity of this, etc. So hopefully we'll have that in a few days.
And as long as it doesn't violate anything, that'd be great
Right.
if you could send that along.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot. Really appreciate you coming on, Mark, and
Thank you.
helping us out. And we'll stay in touch. Thanks.
This is a great group, so I always appreciate being here. Thanks,
All
Bob.
right, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, and so was you waving your hand, John? Is that you signing out, or was that you just? Oh, okay, all right, take it easy. So the only other thing I had listed as a topic for tonight is maybe just to explain to the group that who people might already be aware, but the city of New Bedford has put out an RFP, and they're in process trying to look for proposals for a partner in the city of New Bedford to help them with a deadline of October 26th, I think it is. So we have a couple people on from the city right now. I don't know if Jonathan or Brian, you'd like to add any more detail or.
Yeah, I can add a couple of items. So we I think I've brought this to the group a couple times, but we've worked with CTC, which I know some of you people are familiar with. We were able to get a feasibility study completed. It took somewhere of about a year. The final number came in what we think is an insurmountable amount of money, but they're saying it would take about 151, somewhere in that range, $151 million to hook up every home in the city. They estimate there's about 46,000 units or so in the city. We have a lot of obviously multifamily units. So once the mayor kind of saw that number, he kind of realized this is not something the city can undertake on its own. So we've been working with them to create an RFP to build that public-private relationship with another, at this point, probably going to be an ISP, but with our terms in mind. I think the idea from the mayor's perspective is we just need competition. And I know a lot of the South Coast communities have that same problem where Comcast is the only ISP in town, and there's really no benefit for them to lower costs or provide better service. So we'll see what the process entails. The RFP is on the city's website. Bob, I don't know if I'm sure you probably have that link if you want to share it with the community. Our feasibility study is also public information. So if anyone wants it on that same link, so if Bob could provide that, that'd be great. But I'll definitely keep the group updated as we go along. We have about a month until we get our proposals in, and then see how long it takes therefore after that.
Great.
Okay,
Fantastic.
thanks for mentioning that. I will put that in the message to the group. And I know there's a lot of people that have attended in the past that are not here right now, so that may be interested in that as well. So, and just for a little further information, that the town of Fairhaven is looking to follow suit with something along the lines of what New Bedford is doing. We did not have the same type of feasibility study done, although we had a master plan developed and for the town, and we have some general information that told us roughly what we could expect for the system to cost to be built. So I'm no longer a member of the select board in Fairhaven, but the current select board has given direction to the broadband study committee that they are not really interested in entertaining a build out of that order of magnitude that the town would be responsible for funding. So they've asked us to look at low or no cost options that would involve, some sort of a public-private partnership or and so we're gonna, borrow the New Bedford RFP as a template and kind of work towards something similar with our goal of trying to get some responses and be ready for potentially if a town meeting vote would be required for something like this, then the first week in May is our annual town meeting in Fairhaven. And if it doesn't require a town meeting vote, then to put something before the select board potentially sometime between now and then. So I just wanted to kind of bring, others. I know the only other community on the call right now that local to us here, where we talked about doing somewhat of a regional approach is Westport. And I think the city came to the conclusion, and I think in Fairhaven, although our broadband study committee hasn't met since in recent weeks, we've had a couple of postponements in our meeting, which is now scheduled for next Thursday. But I believe that the idea that to get several communities or half dozen communities together to collaborate on an RFP and get one regional approach is just too complex and time consuming. The likelihood of getting everyone on the same page and going through all those legal, issues to try and get there is going to be or would be very difficult. However, if we were all to arrive at receiving proposals in a similar time frame, not too far separated from each other, there may be some economies of scale and working together with if the same developer seems to come to the forefront in several local communities. So we're hoping to not be too far. The city, that remains to be seen how quickly we can get things off the ground in Fairhaven. So but I just wanted to make sure that people are aware of that. And So I
Can I just add that from the point of view of Westport, I think we're in very much the same situation. We're involved in the current election and all other things are put on the back burner for now. But I will be looking for, if things turn out right, why we'll be looking for ways to move ahead. And it would be beneficial for all of us, I think, if we could do it jointly with neighboring towns.
Yeah, I think
Yep.
the answer to that, and to a certain degree, is going to be with the developers. You know, what they find is a sweet spot for the size of communities that they want to bring into the fold. The economies of scale on their end, because I think largely this would be funded by someone like that. And if not, I know in Fairhaven that it seems like if it's not something that can be largely funded by outside sources, then it's probably not going to happen for us. But Bob, you had your hand up.
Yeah, real quick, just along those same lines, the town of Falmouth, the municipal light plant put out an RFI, and they got a number of proposals back that were 100% industry funded, public-private partnerships, or 100% town funded. And what they've done with those three, they got three. I won't call them full-blown proposals, but inquiries, is they've given a CTC a contract to do a comparison study among those three as kind of templates for each of the three options: full private, full public, or public-private partnership. And that is supposedly due out in September. And here we are at the end of September, and it's not out yet. But very soon, when we see that, when it's public, we'll circle. Go ahead, Brian.
There's
Brian?
a CTC CTC did finish a study Cape wide, I think. I'll dig it up here. Yeah, and they're about to finish a more detailed one for Falmouth.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. So what are you saying that they're trying to, that the goal is to identify what's the best course of action, whether it's 100% private or a PPA or municipal? That's what the goal is?
Well,
For
certainly
Falmouth,
it's,
yeah.
again, the same stumbling blocks. Again, there's a lot of reticence on the select board to even think about a huge commitment of bonding money when there are other, we've got a lot of wastewater demands, et cetera, on along the Cape. So they're trying to figure out what's a feasible way forward, and should they approach other private partners for public-private partnerships, et cetera. So
I think you would be hard pressed to find too many communities in Massachusetts that wouldn't find themselves in the same boat. I mean, really, right? I mean, who has $100 million that's at their disposal for a city, or 20, 25, $30 million for a town? It's just so.
Bob,
the numbers are actually not bad overall, but it does sound like a huge number, but when it's a 40-year asset and you average out over time, that's actually not bad. But it does politically is always a big number.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to, because I've been sitting in that position where it's you can make a case for it, but it's still a leap of faith for a lot of people, and it's a liability that people necessarily going to feel comfortable with. Even if you show it on paper, you start talking about that, and people say, well, if it doesn't pan out, now what's going to happen with our school system and our police and fire and our ability to fix the roads? And it's just the risk factor is something that's really just a tough pill. But
Bob,
anyway,
a quick apology here. I'm down to 1% on my cell phone, so if I drop off here, I'll say
thanks a lot.
goodbye to everybody in advance.
Thanks.
A sequence that we've talked about would be to have a public-private partnership where the private partner would raise the capital to build the system and get it up and running. And then the public partner, the municipal light plant, would then raise the money at municipal bonding rates to buy out the private partner and keep the ownership over the long term, and still keep it off of the general fund of the town as an obligation, that it would be the revenue bonds funded by the revenue from the
Revenue.
operation of the municipal light plan. And that kind of a sequence, I haven't been able to find anybody who's willing to put together a proposal for that, but that's what we've had in mind as a way of trying to make the thing work.
Yeah, I
Thank
think that's going to be the interesting part, is to get someone that, to put that into reality. But
So
anyway,
that's the bonfire model. Bonfire presented that to Falmouth. So if you take a look at the two reports I just linked in the chat, those were Barnstable County. One of them has a chart of all of the options, from full town ownership, partial town ownership with a private equity partner, all the way to fully private. And I think it's 5 different models. So if you go through the report of the ways to do it, CTC has already released those in these reports.
okay, all right, thank you. That's really helpful. I just copied that from your chat, and I'll distribute that as well. It's okay to distribute that to the larger
Oh,
group.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
those are online in public.
Yes, okay. All right, that sounds good. Now, is there any, I think these are kind of the key areas that we were looking to touch base on today. If anyone else has anything you want to bring to the discussion, we can do that now, or we can look to sign off. That's up to you. All right, sounds like there's not much more. Is there an interest in trying to see if we can meet shortly before that deadline, that in October? It's now, you think it's October 18th. Should we try to meet at like the middle, well, a couple weeks into the month? Is there anything that we would need to try to do before the 18th, or are we kind of past that point?
Either before or after
Yeah.
we aren't gonna, if we won't have much influence on it, there's not much point in meeting before, but wait and meet after and see
Mhm.
what the hell they've done.
Well, that's true. That could be, and maybe that's an opportunity to meet and discuss what happened there, and then also we'll stay in touch with Mark Lanigan from the Senator's office and ask him, maybe for an update when we do meet. Ask him for an update on this discussion about hiring a consultant. All right, so maybe we'll look towards kind of similar time frame in October, towards the end of the month, and
Fine.
try to get that on our calendar sooner rather than later. So I apologize for not scheduling these meetings a little bit earlier. Might be hurting our attendance, but okay. But thanks for everyone that did make it. And Brian, yeah, enjoy your time over in Thailand. I don't know if it's for business or a pleasure, but in either case, enjoy yourself.
I'm just working around the clock here, so.
Okay,
All right, good night.
thank you.